Yeah. So, okay. So as I was preparing for today, I had this thought. You know, when things can become routine, which is like maybe going to church or listening to a talk, I know I can tend to forget the power of each moment. So I'm simply going to invite you to consider that what if the next 20 minutes that we all share together, what if right here and right now, in these next 20 minutes, that we together can change the trajectory of the world toward greater love, wholeness, and unity? What if that's actually possible? Do we believe that the point of power, that Christ, that indwelling Christ is here within us and among us? Do we remember that? Can we inhabit that? That is my first invitation for you here today. Not to say, oh, let's listen to some information that I might apply later. But what if in this moment there is a call for you to wake up? Anthropologist and author and speaker Margaret Mead is famous for saying, you know, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens could change the world. In fact, she says, it's the only thing that ever has. And looking out here, I'm like, you're not even small, right? You know, like, so this is a large group of thoughtful, committed people. Is that possible? So I just want to invite that question to see if it might open you here. You know, whether you just came from watching the news, you know, getting a certain diagnosis, came from a difficult conversation, opening. And now, with that, I would like to open with a Sufi parable. This is one that I opened my book with, actually. So this Sufi parable is about the famous Nasruddin, who's often called the wise fool. So in many spiritual traditions, there's this character often described, you know, in the parables that help us to see, maybe we think we're all this wise and maybe we're being foolish in how we're showing up. So the way the story goes is Mansur is a friend of Nasruddin. And so Mansur goes to visit his friend one evening. And so as he comes and visits, he finds Nasruddin crawling around, kind of like what I was doing a little bit earlier, like crawling around on the ground on the street outside of his home. And so Mansur looks at him. He's like, what are you doing? You look frustrated. Did you lose something? And Mansur turns to him and says, yes, I lost the key to my house. Mansur, being the bestie that he is, he's like, oh, I will help you, right? So he says, I will help you find it. And so he gets on his hands and knees as well and starts scouring the ground, the sidewalk, the edge of the curve under the street lamp where he finds his friend Nasruddin. After a long time of them both diligently looking, Mansur's like, you know, he kind of shakes his head a bit and he asks Nasruddin, hey, so, you know, like you often do with your friends who lose things, where's the last place you had your key, right? Where's the last place you had it? Where did you lose your key? And Nasruddin says, in my house, in my home, he says. And Mansur asks, well, if you lost your key in your home, why are you looking for it out in the street? And Nasruddin, without skipping a beat, says, there's more light out here. So, for me, what this story illustrates is how, even though it seems so ridiculous to look for a key in a place that's not where you lost it, I find that for me on my spiritual journey, I will continually look for wholeness, well-being, unity, out in the world where there is more light. When what we teach in unity, that it is only ever found where it was lost, at home within ourselves, right? So, Charles Fillmore, co-founder of the Unity movement, teaches that the kingdom of heaven is within us. The kingdom of heaven as a state of consciousness, a state of wholeness, a state of oneness, a state of unity. And yet, when I watch the news, I am marching out to the street, right? In order to make things more whole. And to be clear, I am not at all saying do not take action. But the problem is the key to the wholeness and the unity I seek is at home. So when I march out, not centered in my own wholeness, then I am bringing fragmentation. I am bringing my egoic sense of right and wrong, and I think I'm right and you're wrong, to the world. And so, if in unity we believe and say regularly, the kingdom of heaven is within you, that you yourself contain multitudes, that you are made in the image of love itself, right? Then why can we find it so hard, even as a minister, right? I can find it so hard to stay in that remembrance of my knowing. Right? For me, what I've realized is this. The reason that this particular analogy resonates so deeply with me is this. In my personal experience, I remember when I first started to meditate. When I first started to meditate, all I did was cry. Like, it was cry and cry. And then I remember thinking, oh, I thought of myself as a good person. And when I started to meditate, I could feel my anger, and I could feel my fear, and all these things arose for me that I wanted to back away from. It's because I thought, oh, yes, I would like to be love and light, not these things that I saw or felt within myself. There were difficult feelings of even of grief. I'm like, no. This sadness will take me down. I can't go there. So this analogy in the story that says we go out to the light when within the darkness of our being, of our consciousness, we find our wholeness. And so with that, I want to share yet another parable, because one of my key teachers, initials JC, spoke in parables when he taught. So I want to share another parable with you. So there is a legend of a woman long ago who climbs up a mountain to find this legendary mirror. She was told that if you look into this mirror, you will see God. And she's like, I'm going to hustle, I'm going to get up, and I'm going to find that mirror. So she gets up to the top of the mountain, and she finds a sage who is the bearer of this mirror. And so when she looks into the mirror, he's like, oh, this is where you will see the face of God, in this mirror, right? And so she looks, and she gazes, and she's like, wait, that's me. She looks, and she says, that's me, but it is the highest expression of her. And so for me, it would be like, whoa, boy, she's a responsible person. My highest expression, this face of God, is such a generous, wise, compassionate person, and that is the first image that this woman sees as she looks into the mirror of God, right? But then the sage says, look a little more closely, gaze a little bit more deeply. And so she gets quiet. She gazes into this mirror. And as she does, she starts to see these shadow figures in the mirror. And these figures are things like anger, anxiety, maybe selfishness, feeling like, oh, I want good in my life. There are things that she does not like. And when she looks in, what happens? Shame starts to fill her. And so she backs off. She backs off. She's like, oh no, this is not good. I don't want to see this. And then the sage, in all her wisdom, says, it's not in what you claim is good, but in the totality of your being that lies your wholeness and thus your divinity. And so if we believe that we are born in original blessing, that our wholeness is innately complete, when we gaze into this mirror of ourselves, it is important to note what qualities do we elevate? Do we consider, ooh, yeah, that's nice. I'm responsible and hardworking. I care about people. These are good qualities. This is my godlike self. And then what qualities do we back away from, feel ashamed of? And so I invite you to consider right now, and in fact, since this talk is really about you, I want you to just take a moment here to ground in your own being, become present to yourself, this magical, mystical being that you are. I invite you to first just take note. What is it like to be me right now? Because it matters. What is it like to be you? Sense your feet on the ground. What does the temperature feel like? And then gently you can bring your awareness up into your heart space. What feelings am I feeling right now? What is it like to be me? What thoughts are circulating through my mind? See if you can do this with compassionate curiosity. Rather than judging, oh my God, why am I thinking about that still? What about compassionate curiosity? Because you're just curious to know, what is it like to be you? And then, staying with yourself because you matter. Staying within. I invite you to notice, are there feelings or thoughts that you're wanting to shut down? Oh, if I let this out, I'm just going to cry the whole service. If I let my anger out, people might not like me. Just notice. And so I invite you to consider that mirror. You're gazing into the mirror of like, what would you like to be, huh? My ideal self. And what do I reject? And then notice that the circle of divine love wants to come all around the whole thing. The whole of you. But maybe you're the one stopping it. Maybe you're the one backing away. No. the embrace of your shadow. So I invite you to just begin to open your eyes, but you can still stay as connected to yourself as you would like, because you matter. And what if this circle of love that is infinite wants to just embrace all of you, and you're the one backing away? Because you're like, no, this is not likable. This is not going to get me where I want to go, this quality. And so, even as you begin to open your eyes again, I invite you to consider this. That when we talk about wholeness and unity and oneness in the world, in the outer, that all our affirmations, all our speaking to that sort of lightness, like it can be here, up in, like from the neck up, from the thoughts up, from this voice up, when we haven't come around to embrace the whole of who we are inside and to trust that. And why would I want to trust that? Because I'm like, oh my God, this anger, there's enough anger in the world. But what if, as Carl Jung famously said, that enlightenment is not about imagining beings of light, right? But about making the darkness conscious. That by our conscious embrace, my anger, which probably leaked out in passive-aggressive ways, right, might actually come to fuel my activism and my sense of power in my voice. It becomes integrated in my being in a way that is conscious and lived in the world. And the last thing I want to talk about is that Charles Fillmore, co-founder of the Unity Movement, talked a lot about race consciousness, but I don't hear it talked a ton about here in Unity circles. And race consciousness is this idea that which is unconscious, not just within ourselves, but within everyone together, is what outpictures as our shared live experience. But here's the good news. I'm connected to that race consciousness. So the journey and the work that I do within my own being to embrace wholeness with love affects the entirety of race consciousness. That the work that I do within myself opens the whole world up to a more loving, a more unified, shared and outer existence, race consciousness. So what I'd like to do is share just a little bit before we close here today about why I have become so passionate about this thing called the Enneagram. The Enneagram for me is a map of our conscious awakening. That when we go into these dark places, which are inevitable to bring like true, authentic light into the world, there is a map to help me navigate my way. And what this map tells me, that there are 9 fundamentally different frameworks and paradigms for approaching the world. 9 different personas or egos that say, oh, I would like to be this Nhien, but not that. And so when I know that, I can actually begin to name both my idealized self that I want to elevate from my egoic standpoint, and I get to name my shadow parts and start to draw them forward from the unconscious into the conscious. And I'm just going to go around the circle very quickly of the Enneagram, 9 fundamental points. You don't have to know anything about the Enneagram to hear and listen to this and hopefully get something out of hearing this journey through the 9 points of the Enneagram. Point 1. At point 1, those who identify as Enneagram type 1s have the story that they want to be good, pure and good. And so anything that is not that gets shut down. And that is usually things like anger, but also messiness. Anyone who knows anything about transformation and creativity knows that messiness is an inevitable, natural, good part of that. But imagine if in your shadow you're like no to that, then we quash our own individual as well as global transformation. At point 2, the 2 believes pridefully that I am here to give only. I have no needs, and so the 2 squashes this idea that I am humble and a human being, and is actually through my humble receiving that I support the good of the world. Imagine if you were open to this point at point 2 to allow yourself to receive all the bounty and good and love that is rightfully yours to have. How would you be nourished in order to live your life more fully? And then at point 3, which is the one I identify with, there's a belief that I am not innately and authentically whole and valuable and worthy as I am. I have spent my life trying to earn my worth until I met the Enneagram and I realized, oh, that's the fallacy of this number. But if I don't believe I or anyone else has to earn worth through doing, what would life look like? If I'm an Enneagram type 4, I actually believe that I have this deep connection to the suffering of the world. And I am generally attached to looking at the ways that we're struggling, but my shadow is actually joy. That I often don't give permission for joy, and I deem it superficial. At point 5, I believe I'm not ready for the world. I've got to do more research. I've got to figure this out, right? And so just really recognizing how that can quash my ability to I don't want to be foolish. The last thing I want to do is show up and make a mistake like that. And so if I've quashed this and not allowed permission for mystery, what does that do to our shared humanity? And then if I'm a 6 and I've lost the sense of there's a ground of being that infinite, invisible spirit, right? I can't trust what I can't hold on to, a belief system or a person outside myself, then how do I show up in the world? So if I'm a 7, I actually believe that, fun, let's run toward fun and away from boredom and fear, right? And so if I don't face my negative feelings, then I will never really come into a deep experience of my wholeness. And then if I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, I believe that the world is kind of a bully, and so I have to be strong, and I cannot show vulnerability or weakness. So imagine that in the world, where vulnerability and weakness is demonized. But that's within the shadow of those who identify as an 8. And then if I'm a 9, then I believe that I'm not that important. If I'm a 9, I believe that it's not worthwhile to show up anyway. It doesn't matter anyway. And so I don't shine and share my unique gifts in the world. But imagine if across all of these points, we come into a knowing of our innate wholeness and perfection and goodness. We allow ourselves at point 2 to receive. At point 3, we know that we are inherently worthy. At point 4, we know that joy is part of our divine birthright. At point 5, we recognize that we have the information we need to show up and engage in the world in a way that won't deplete us. And then at point 6, we feel the courage that comes from knowing that spirit is the very ground of my being. And then at point 7, we don't run from pain, but we integrate and incorporate the suffering of ourselves and of the world so that our hearts are made more beautiful and tender and gentle in that knowing. At point 8, we recognize that, quote, weakness and vulnerability are true strengths, and we can engage each other in a way that allows the world to be more tender, to be softer in the way that we exert our power. And then at point 9, we remember that it matters that we show up. And so with this, I want to thank you all for this opportunity to share with you here today. I just want to sum up today in 3 basic points. The kingdom of heaven, of wholeness, is within you. Within you. And then it's all of you, not the parts that you were told were acceptable. So allowing space to embrace those dark parts. And then finally, because of race consciousness, what you let yourself wake up to and embrace inside yourself, you automatically do on behalf of our humanity. And from this ground of wholeness and of being, we actually can bring forth a more loving world from the inside out. Thank you.